What does Chelmsford want from its young people, homegrown young people? What kind of skills do you want here in town?
We need to raise awareness of what's going on, not only for the businesses but for the community.
How is energy going to be produced? And how do we integrate that in a vision for the landscape of our towns and villages?
What's the point of Chelmsford just trying to do better than its neighbours and grab stuff from them? That becomes a zero-sum game. We're at a place called A Canteen, and we're here for a discussion about Chelmsford's future as a productive place. This session, we are open to suggestion about things that big strategic changes that you think could really make a difference. And we've had a really interesting 3 hours of vision making for the future of Chelmsford over the long term.
Chelmsford used to be a place where it's very easy to do business.
It's strong in education, it's strong in retail,
Yes.
it still has about 5,000 manufacturing jobs.
Someone who wants to invest money is welcomed and helped to spend their money in a wise way.
Waste. How do we deal with waste in a way that is productive in terms of recycling, reuse?
Chelmsford does not celebrate its history.
Looking at Chelmsford, where it's come from, it's had a really interesting and kind of proud history first as a market town, later as an industrial and a manufacturing town, more recently as a service town with a very broad range of different business activities.
There are all sorts of economic issues and the question is, can we balance them? Can we actually create enough wealth to pay for the additional things that we're looking to do?
We then started talking more about aspirational things, about the kinds of productivity that Chelmsford might have in future.
And a particular challenge for us as a team and a council is to encourage inward investment, particularly in what we call high value jobs.
Over 65, so what does a town do to become the best place for over 65s, whether it's for volunteering, senior entrepreneurship?
We do fail, I believe, business to communicate.
Apprenticeships are a really big thing. If there's any money at the moment from the government, it's in apprenticeships.
Around apprenticeships, about skills for sustainable communities, about what to do about consumption and how retailing might work in the future, and the way that people will be able to live, work and be in Chelmsford for the long term.
And it's not just about the creative economy, the knowledge economy. This needs to be a town for happy bus drivers as well as high value jobs.
Don't you think things are likely to kind of shift fairly dramatically? For example, oil gets incredibly expensive. Some of the discussion points that really stood out for me were the idea about a kind of sustainable park and ride, so that even though you might continue to have vehicle-based transport, it might be electric cars, there might be charging points.
If it's so important to the town, let's think about the park and ride of the future. Let's think about the park and ride that doesn't take up too much land or that doesn't become a place where you don't otherwise want to go.
What is it that is sort of about the productive town or city that's absolutely kind of unique? Another one was about the uniqueness of Chelmsford.
Think about the places that we go to because we really like them. What is it that makes a town interesting?
This came out in lots of different ways, but they felt they want to communicate both about Chelmsford's past, about what it does now and what it might do in the future.
At some point you actually have to make a brave decision to flatten large areas and get it right.
There may be a role for the Shire Hall as a hub building.
There was a very interesting discussion about the combination of adaptive reuse and new development, so that Chelmsford's future, productive future, might be about some very positive kind of interplay between reusing the very beautiful building stock they have now and developing new places.
Building design, has to be at a human scale. Once you actually lose that, and that's why we dislike the 60s buildings.
Central Chelmsford is fast becoming a place to live.
And we're not just talking about young people, we're talking about people choose to live in the town centre.
And part of that discussion was about vibrancy, about a convivial place, which would be supported by having different kinds of housing stock. So this would draw in, for example, younger people, people who want to live in central Chelmsford, people who would be drawn here by quality of life that's particularly good.
Since 2001, there's another 2,000 people living within the town, and the town is their home, and their home is probably also their place of work, and so on and so forth.
How does Chelmsford want to project itself onto the world?
I was struck by how attractive the central area is because of the way the road fans out.
The most opportunities are along the river frontage and therefore not ones to be lost.
How can a place have identity without having some story of how it fits into an interdependent world?
Here's London. You're really talking about all of this.
But in the end, the measure of this work will be that it shapes decisions and that it inspires actions.
We're in the Shire Hall, and today Matthew Taylor, head of the Royal Society for the Arts, has facilitated our Town Commons or charrette, which is the synthesising event of a number of workshops that have run over the last few weeks.
So with that in mind, let me start with table 1, which is
the Town Commons or charrette was really 5 roundtable discussions which were set at different scales. The one was a building scale, dealing with transformational buildings within Chelmsford, including the Shire Hall.
This is the Annight building.
Okay. All the previous events have sharpened people's thinking so that today it's moving from an analysis to actually think about what we need to do.
That is... The second scale was neighbourhood scales, which really dealt with connectivity and linkages, both virtual and physical.
They call it the village, but there are no shops.
It's great to see people wanting to take it further, not just it's their job, but actually try and do something with it.
We spoke about who are the kinds of people that you see every day, your postman, your dustman, whom you trust a little bit more than you trust your average stranger because you recognise them from daily interactions.
And to see that there's a body that sort of wants to get these people together and make these connections.
I think it's very exciting, and it is well linked to London, so it's got great connections to enable the businesses to connect in with the capital city, etc.
The third scale was to do with the town scale, its identity and reason for being.
Why are people somehow aspirationally thinking, I need to commute to London to get the kind of job I want?
This part of Essex has got a history of accommodating those sorts of international executives.
And then the regional scale was looking at Chelmsford in the context of other Essex towns and its relationship to London.
Cambridge with its scientific and technology links.
And beyond, in fact, in the context of Europe.
The towns and cities are driven and have a certain quality, often in the 20th century, because they've had a school of architecture. And
you very rapidly come up against the fringes of government.
And the national, international scale was really looking at how the local connects with the international in terms of issues like outsourcing and climate change, peak oil, looking at what one could do to build resilience at both a local scale and internationally.
What I'm interested in is the network city. Now, this isn't traditional participation. This is driven by communities of interest or practice. So it'll be the allotment group, it will be the Wilderness Foundation, it'll be all these things which have a passion about something which can then develop a wider interest.
I was reminded of Ruskin saying it's buildings that make up a town, but it's citizens that make a city.
There's so much potential with all the different people that I've spoken to and sort of heard speak, so I'm quite interested to see how it carries on.
If Chelmsford has city aspirations, what kind of city?
And the view is that's come out pretty strongly is that we don't want to be simply an old-fashioned place that's satisfied with where we are. We actually want to aspire to something better.
Here are spaces which the opportunity is to turn them into places. We need practical ideas as seen as projects, things you actually do which are very tangible, because that's what gets people involved and makes community. But we also need ideas which are about the processes, what I call the long-term programs you want to put in place for things which will make the change happen.
And so 4 people in the group, one's going to stand up and say this is now true, one's going to stand up and say this is no longer true, one's going to say this is what I'm going to do, and one's going to say give us the £2,000 because we're going to do this.
So following the brainstorming at the 5 different tables, Matthew presented the groups with a challenge, a 4-point challenge. The one was to look in 5 years' time and to say what was now true about Chelmsford and what was no longer true, and then to get people to actually commit to some kind of action of something that they would take forward in terms of changing Chelmsford.
And my personal pledge is that I get together a group of 16 to 17-year-olds
One of the most inspirational ideas for me today was a local architect pledging to mentor young school children who were interested in architecture and the environment, and to give them the technology to be able to map existing derelict and empty buildings and to help envision how those might be used.
We want £2,000 to kickstart that civic supermarket.
So it's going to be a movie about Chelmsford by the people of Chelmsford.
And the fourth point was to pitch an idea to the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts Catalyst Fund, for a project that might seed some bigger initiative.
You can vote for Chelmsford, the movie.
And the rest of us, by clapping, actually voted for the most inspirational ideas. What was very inspirational for me was the way that both local people and quite influential people from further afield took up on different ideas that captured their imaginations, and they committed to doing something, some small or larger action that would really contribute towards change within Chelmsford.
And I think we have a model here of a new sort of civic society which is very proactive and very interested in doing things.
So that's what I'm really interested to see, is how many of those ideas we can sort of hold on to and make something of, because some of them are really interesting and really have a lot of potential and a lot of good in them.
Something else that strikes me from today is the enthusiasm that is absolutely genuine and the desire to stay with this, and in particular the RSA's commitment to stay with this, because I think that could provide real long-term cultural leadership of the sort that's absolutely needed.
So this process now is really moving into an action phase whereby people take some of these initiatives forward, and what we've tried to do was seed it in the local context so that we use the entrepreneurial spirit, the creative spirit of local people to really take action for themselves.